I invite you to enter with me into a sacred tension, the place in the soul where many are lost, yet few understand the map they carry within. It is a space you may know well, the deep, fog-laden valley after spiritual awakening where motivation dies and silence consumes you. You may ask, why, after all I've seen, all I've realized, all I've awakened to, why do I now feel less alive, less moved? The answer is not in your failure. It is in your transformation. The first act of awakening is revelation. The second act, more subtle, more torturous, is disintegration. Many believe that awakening is the end of suffering. No, it is the beginning of conscious suffering, the suffering that refines the soul and calls it home. After a spiritual awakening, one might expect a new surge of energy, purpose, and clarity. But often, what follows is an overwhelming void, a strange emptiness where motivation once lived. You wake up and feel nothing. No pull to pursue old dreams, no urgency to act. Many interpret this as a failure, a regression, a loss of something precious. But this experience is not a step backward. It is the threshold of integration. The psyche, having glimpsed a higher truth, must now pause, not to escape, but to absorb. This pause is sacred. It is the moment between inhalation and exhalation, between dying and being reborn. The human spirit is not designed to sprint endlessly from one revelation to the next. The deeper the awakening, the more the psyche requires time to reorganize itself. It is not that you are lazy. It is that the very structure that once motivated you has been dismantled. The ego, the conditioned self, has lost its centrality, and with it, the desires that once compelled you forward. When truth arrives like a lightning bolt, it doesn't just illuminate, it burns. It scorches illusions, dismantles defenses, and exposes everything you've built on shaky ground. The initial high of awakening is exhilarating. You may feel connected, light, powerful, but soon after you are cast into silence, because your system must catch up to the insight. Your body, your nervous system, your emotions, they all need time to metabolize the shift. The soul moves at the pace of eternity, not urgency, so this loss of motivation is not the end. It is the beginning of deeper work. You have not lost your fire. It has been taken into the underworld for refinement. Just as a seed must first crack open and rot before it can sprout, your former self must disintegrate so that something more authentic can grow. And this disintegration is quiet, slow, often invisible. It feels like nothing is happening, but beneath the surface, an inner realignment is underway. The psyche knows how to protect itself. When an overwhelming truth emerges, it creates a container. It says, wait. Not because you are weak, but because you are becoming whole. If you act too quickly, if you try to force motivation before the new self has formed, you risk recreating the same patterns under a different disguise. True change is not cosmetic. It is foundational. This space, this void, is not a punishment. It is an invitation to rest, to reflect, to let go, to stop measuring your worth by productivity, to stop confusing momentum with meaning. You are not here to constantly climb ladders built by others. You are here to find the ground of your being, and that ground takes time to appear. In the darkness after awakening, you are being given a choice, to rebuild your life on the same egoic scripts or to allow the soul to lead. But the soul does not shout, it whispers, and you can only hear it when all other noise has fallen away. This is what the void really is, a sacred silence, a blank page, the space where integration begins. You are not lost, you are integrating, you are not failing, you are transforming. And if you honor this pause, if you listen, rest, and allow, you will emerge not with borrowed motivation, but with a new compass that points true north. When you lose all motivation after a profound awakening, it is common to believe that something has gone terribly wrong. You may ask yourself, why do I feel so numb now, so detached, so lifeless? I thought I had awakened. Shouldn't I feel more alive than ever? This emotional dullness, this psychological grayness is often misunderstood. Most people assume they are depressed, that something is broken inside them. But what you are experiencing is not necessarily depression. It is the death of the ego. And the death of the ego is one of the most misunderstood processes on the spiritual path. The ego is not your enemy. It is not evil or something to be eradicated. It is the structure that held your identity together, that helped you function in the world. It gave you names for things, goals to pursue, and a sense of personal continuity. But it is also a mask, a performance, a house built on ideas you inherited rather than chose. When you awaken, whether through spiritual insight, personal crisis, or a spontaneous moment of clarity, you begin to see this structure for what it is, a temporary, fragile construct. The moment of awakening often feels expansive, liberating, beautiful. You feel a profound sense of peace, connection, and truth. But what happens next is often darker, subtler, and far more disorienting. The ego, having lost its central role, begins to dissolve. Its habitual drives and narratives start to fall away. But because the ego is what once organized your motivations, its collapse feels like losing your entire operating system. You no longer feel the urgency to chase success, attention, or even personal development. And because you are so used to interpreting this kind of inner stillness as depression, you assume something is wrong. But this depression is not a disorder, it is a transition. It is the psyche letting go of its old scaffolding before building something new. The emptiness is not a void to escape. It is a clearing for something more real to emerge. Understand this: the ego fights for its survival. Even after awakening, parts of it will try to cling to old habits and fears. It will whisper, "You're wasting time, you're not doing enough, you're falling behind." But if you look closely, those voices no longer have the same power. They sound hollow, their emotional charge is weakened, and that's what makes this stage so confusing, because you're not fully ego-driven anymore, but you're not yet fully soul-led either. You're in between. This in-between state is where your ego is dying and your true self is gestating. It is quiet, uncomfortable, and deeply transformative. Think of it like winter. The leaves have fallen. The branches are bare. Nothing is blooming. From the outside, it looks like death. But beneath the surface, life is preparing itself. Roots are deepening. Seeds are storing energy. Something is forming, but it has not yet shown itself. So when you feel numb, unmotivated, disinterested in the things that once excited you, do not panic. Do not rush to diagnose yourself. Ask instead, what part of me is dying? And what is trying to be born? Allow this phase to unfold naturally. Do not try to fix yourself. You are not broken. You are in a process of shedding, releasing, dissolving. The loss of old motivation is making space for something new. Something not driven by fear, approval, or comparison. Something rooted in soul. You may not be able to see it yet, but trust that this inner death is a sacred act. It is not depression in the pathological sense. It is a sacred emptiness, an invitation to come home to yourself. Let it happen. Let yourself fall apart. Only then can something deeper, truer, and more enduring arise from the ashes. After the initial illumination of awakening, something unexpected often occurs. Darkness returns. Not in the same form as before, not as ignorance or illusion, but as a shadow that now steps forward into the light. This can be deeply confusing. You may wonder, how can I feel such darkness after I've experienced the truth? Shouldn't I feel more free, more whole? But what you are experiencing is not a failure of awakening. It is its inevitable consequence. The moment you awaken to the light, the shadow begins to emerge. The shadow is not evil. It is not the enemy. It is simply the part of you that has been rejected, repressed, or forgotten. Everything you were told not to be, everything you were punished for feeling, everything you judged as wrong within yourself, this is your shadow. It is made up of rage, grief, need, vulnerability, selfishness, shame, desire, all the elements of human nature that did not fit the image of who you were supposed to be. Before awakening, the ego kept the shadow hidden. It buried it beneath layers of personality, social roles, and distraction. But awakening does not just open you to divine light. It also opens the unconscious. It tears down the defenses and invites your whole self into the room. And so, after awakening, many people find themselves facing old wounds, forgotten traumas, deep insecurities. The pain they thought they had outgrown comes back. But this is not regression. This is revelation. The light of awakening does not erase the shadow, it illuminates it, and that is a terrifying gift. You may begin to feel things you thought you had transcended: jealousy, anger, shame, emptiness. These emotions are not signs that you have lost your way. They are signs that your inner world is reorganizing itself. The parts of you that have waited in darkness for years are now stepping into consciousness to be seen, heard, and integrated. This is the deeper work of awakening, not just to touch peace and clarity, but to embrace the full spectrum of who you are, and that includes the shadow. If you reject the shadow after awakening, you create a new duality, a spiritual identity that excludes the unspiritual parts of yourself. But this only delays the real transformation. True awakening is not an escape from the shadow, it is a marriage with it. To become whole, you must descend as well as ascend. You must turn toward the darkness, not to drown in it, but to meet the parts of yourself that were never given a voice. This is why motivation can vanish after awakening, because the soul is asking you to do something far more difficult than pursue goals or chase joy. It is asking you to confront what you've avoided, to hold the pain you disowned, to love the parts you were taught to hate. And this is not glamorous work. It is slow. It is humbling. It breaks you open so that you may be reformed. The loss of motivation is not a punishment. It is a necessary withdrawal from the surface so that your inner world can come forward. The shadow says, now that you've found the light, don't forget me. Now that you know the truth, don't abandon what's real. And what's real is messy, it's human, it's raw, but it's also sacred. To walk the path of integration is to allow all of yourself to exist, not just the enlightened parts, but the forgotten ones too. To let your anger teach you about boundaries, to let your sadness reveal your longing, to let your fear point to what you still cherish. The shadow is not there to destroy you, it is there to complete you. So when it rises, do not run. Do not numb yourself or distract or spiritualize it away. Sit with it, speak to it, ask what it wants you to see, let it become a teacher, because only by integrating your shadow can you reclaim your full power, your true clarity, and a motivation that comes not from the fear of who you are, but from the embrace of all that you are. When we speak of motivation vanishing after awakening, we are really speaking of a death, a quiet, profound death of the self we once thought we were. And with that death comes the disappearance of something we rarely question: desire. The old desires, the ones that used to energize you, that pushed you to achieve, to prove, to become, begin to fall away. They no longer make sense. They feel artificial, distant, like echoes of someone else's dreams. This disorientation is not only expected, it is essential, for the identity that housed those desires is dissolving, and with it, the fuel that once moved you. Before awakening, our desires are often inherited. We don't realize it, but most of what we chase, success, approval, admiration, security, is not born from our true nature. It's shaped by culture, by family, by fear, by survival. We are conditioned to want certain things, to value certain outcomes, to construct a life around goals that may have nothing to do with who we really are. Then comes awakening, like a thunderclap, a stripping away of illusion, a vision of truth so piercing that it shatters the scaffolding of your former life. And suddenly, the things you once wanted no longer excite you. The ambitions you pursued with such intensity feel empty. The goals you clung to seem absurd, or at least irrelevant. You may try to go back, to stir up the old desires, to rekindle the old fire, but something in you knows it won't work. The machinery that once moved you is broken, and you're not meant to repair it. You're meant to let it rust and fall apart. This is the sacred in-between, the space between the death of old desires and the birth of new ones. And it is uncomfortable. You feel unmoored, uncertain, sometimes even ashamed. In a world that idolizes purpose and productivity, not wanting anything can feel like a failure. But in truth, it's a transition, a waiting period between false fuel and authentic direction. The psyche is wise. It won't let you move forward with half-truths anymore. It won't let you generate energy from ego, competition, or insecurity, and so it pauses. It shuts down the system, not to punish you, but to protect your rebirth. It is burning away everything that is not you, and that includes the old reasons for doing, striving, and wanting. This is why it's so vital not to force your way through this stage. Don't rush to create new goals just to fill the silence. Don't chase new desires just because the old ones have died. Sit with the emptiness. Let yourself be desireless for a while, not numb, not apathetic, but open, receptive, curious, because something new is forming beneath the surface. A new self, born not from programming but from presence, and this self will desire, but differently. It won't desire from lack but from alignment. It won't chase goals to validate its existence, but to express its truth. The new desires will arise slowly, organically. They will emerge like seedlings after winter, fragile but real. You'll notice them not because they shout, but because they hum with quiet inevitability. They feel right, whole, true, and when they come, you won't need to force motivation. It will return on its own, not as the frantic push of the old self, but as a calm, steady pull from your inner compass. You'll be moved, not driven, called, not compelled, so let the old desires die, mourn them if you must, thank them for what they gave you, and then release them. You are not losing your purpose. You are clearing space for a new one to find you. One that is not built on who the world told you to be, but on who you actually are. One of the most unsettling experiences after a profound awakening is the sudden collapse of direction. You may have once known who you were, what you wanted, and where you were going. You had plans, ambitions, and structures. You may have lived with a sense of certainty, even if only an illusion, but awakening strips all of that away, and in its place, there is a vast, uncharted space. You look around and realize, I no longer know who I am, what I want, or where I'm heading. This is not a mistake. This is the necessary disorientation that follows the dismantling of the false self. The old identity, the one that had labels, preferences, and plans, was built around the ego's idea of life. It was shaped by societal norms, family expectations, unconscious fears, and unexamined beliefs. Awakening shatters that scaffolding. It shows you, sometimes in an instant, that who you thought you were was a mask, a construct, and when the mask falls away, you are left with a raw, open field of being. Beautiful, yes, but also terrifying, because without the old identity, you cannot return to the old goals, and the new self has not yet spoken. This is the moment the psyche enters sacred ground. You are being invited to surrender not just what you do, but who you think you are. You are being pulled into a deeper inquiry, one that cannot be answered through intellect or ambition. You are not being asked to redesign your life, but to listen, not to decide, but to discover. In this liminal space, the loss of direction is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of depth. It means you are no longer content with superficial answers. You are no longer interested in chasing meaning. You want to become meaning, but to do that, you must first get lost. You must let the inner compass reorient itself, and that process is slow, mysterious, often uncomfortable. The modern world does not honor this phase. It tells you to be clear, decisive, focused, to always have a 5-year plan. But the soul does not move in straight lines. It spirals, it digests, it listens, it waits. And so, what feels like stagnation is often a deep internal reordering. During this time, you may feel disconnected from everything: your work, your relationships, even your spiritual practices. Nothing seems to fit anymore. That is because the old life was built around a person who no longer exists. And until the new self is ready to emerge, nothing external will feel quite right. That discomfort is not a problem to solve, it is a signal to trust. Many try to escape this phase by grabbing onto the next idea, the next identity. They reinvent themselves prematurely, not from clarity, but from fear of the void. But the void is essential. It is the womb of true becoming. If you rush through it, you only recreate the past in new forms. Instead, you are being called to be with the not knowing, to sit in the space where answers haven't arrived, to learn to live without a script, to trust that something inside you knows the way, even if your conscious mind does not. This is a radical kind of trust. It's not passive, it's not lazy, it's a courageous surrender to the mystery. It means learning to follow whispers instead of maps. To notice what draws you, not from urgency but from quiet resonance. To live in alignment with a deeper rhythm, one that cannot be forced. Eventually, a new direction will arise, but it will not come from pressure or panic. It will come from presence. You will feel drawn, not driven, pulled, not pushed. And when you act, it will not be to build a new mask, but to express the truth you've found by being willing to get lost. So if you find yourself directionless, do not rush to find a path. Let the path find you, in silence, in stillness, in surrender. You are not losing your way. You are leaving the map behind so you can finally follow your soul. In the silence that follows awakening, something profound often begins to stir beneath the surface. A new voice, faint but unmistakably real. It does not come in the form of a command or a motivational surge or an intellectual conclusion. It comes like a whisper, a quiet nudge, a subtle but persistent pull towards something that feels inexplicably right. This is the emergence of the soul's voice, and if you listen, really listen, it will guide you in a way that no external authority, system, or belief ever could. After awakening, the ego's voice starts to fade. The inner chatter that once pushed you, you should do this, you have to be that, you must become more, no longer has the same grip. What once motivated you ceases to matter. And in its absence, the inner world becomes eerily quiet. This silence is unnerving at first. We are so conditioned to respond to loudness, strong opinions, external expectations, clear goals, that when it all falls away, we feel lost. But this inner quiet is not empty. It is pregnant with a different kind of knowing. The soul does not speak in noise. It does not argue or debate or insist. It emerges slowly in the spaciousness you once filled with distraction. It speaks through resonance, through a feeling in your chest when something aligns, through a softness in your body when you're on the right path, through the peace that arrives when you're finally still. Unlike the ego, the soul doesn't care about success or failure. It doesn't operate through fear or lack. It doesn't chase. It attracts, it magnetizes, and it always speaks in the language of truth. At first, it may be difficult to hear. The conditioning of the old self takes time to quiet. You may still question yourself. Am I doing enough? Am I falling behind? Shouldn't I feel more driven? These doubts are the echoes of your former identity. Let them pass through without clinging. They do not reflect who you are becoming. To hear the soul, you must cultivate stillness, not just in action, but in attention. You must create space in your life where nothing is demanded of you. This may mean going for silent walks, sitting in nature, meditating without a goal, or simply lying awake in bed and listening. It is not in doing more that the soul reveals itself, but in being more fully present. The soul is always speaking, but it will not compete for your attention. You must come to it with reverence, with patience, with humility. As the soul begins to speak, you may notice the return of desire, but a different kind of desire. And not the restless craving of the ego, but a soulful yearning, a draw toward creating something meaningful, toward expressing your truth, not proving your worth, toward simplicity, not performance. The new motivation that arises is not based on fear of missing out or desire for approval. It comes from an inner yes, a felt sense of alignment. You may not be able to explain why something feels right, but you will know it in your bones. You will also begin to experience peace, not the temporary peace that comes from checking tasks off a list, but the deeper peace of coherence, of being in harmony with yourself. This peace doesn't always mean happiness, but it does mean honesty. You will cry more easily, but also love more freely. You will no longer be interested in pretending. You will live with less noise and more truth. This is what it means to awaken into authenticity. The loss of motivation wasn't a problem to solve. It was a path to a deeper voice, a voice that will not lead you to the life you expected, but to the life that is yours. A life rooted in essence, not image. A life guided not by the mind's plans, but by the soul's quiet, unwavering compass. Trust this voice, let it lead you, even if you don't yet understand where it's going. Because where it's taking you is not a destination, but a homecoming to the self you were always meant to be.